Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the RacingNews365.com podcast, looking back on last weekend's Miami Grand Prix. It is a very special episode for those who can see the reason why on YouTube. Joining myself, Nick Golding, and lead editor Ian Parks is none other than former Force India Racing Point, Aston Martin and Alpine team principal Otmar Szafnauer. Otmar, firstly, thank you so much for joining myself and Ian. Your background looks stunning. I'm very jealous. How have you been? How are you? What have you been up to recently?
Well, I mean, as you can see, we're in Florida, and it's good to be here with you. And one more day in Florida, and then I'll be making my way back to England. But it was a good race in Florida, and I had the opportunity to walk amongst the fans a bit and see the crowd and see the excitement of a sprint weekend as well. And I was asking a lot of people if they enjoy the sprint format, and many of them said if you're actually coming to the race, they prefer to have a sprint weekend. But if you're watching it on TV, some of them preferred the traditional format. So it's a bit split, but for sure, those who were at the race, they liked the fact you saw a race on Saturday, a sprint race, which was eventful in the midfield. And then a race on Sunday that was eventful at the front. So it was overall a really good weekend in Miami for the sport.
Ian, of course, you were at the circuit till very late. McLaren celebrations for Lando Norris ran deep into the night, and based on social media to the nightclubs as well, it seems. Have you fully recovered from yesterday's action?
Yeah, it was a tremendously busy weekend, Nick. As we know, we've been working on Racing News 365. It was a lot of action, and we got the race that the sport really needed, as far as I can see. Max has dominated now for coming up to 2.5 years. And this was a real shot in the arm for F1. Lando Norris, after all this time, at the 110th time of asking, his 110th Grand Prix, finally getting that monkey off his back, the weight off his shoulders, as Andrea Stella, the McLaren team principal, put it, with that first victory. Yeah, so a real boost for the sport overall, I say.
And of course, we will delve into the Miami Grand Prix. But first of all, Otmar, I've got to ask you about events. Firstly, congratulations on the successful launch of your new app. For those who are unaware, what is the app? What's it for? And what's the big idea behind it?
Yeah, so the big idea behind it was developed really for traveling teams. So we started with developing it for a Formula One team. And forever, for my 26 years of traveling, the way we used to put itineraries together was on pieces of paper. So the ladies or men in the travel office, they would book all of our travel for us, including hotels, hire cars, flights, visa applications, all those things. And all that information, person by person that traveled, went onto a paper itinerary. And those paper itineraries, I noticed, one were pretty thick because there's 125 of us that travel, and there's a lot of information for every one of us: what hotel we're in, the phone number of the hotel, your booking reference, what flight you're on going there, what flight you're on coming back. All those things per person times 125 meant you had an itinerary of 5, 6, 7, 8 pages long. And then whenever something changed, somebody dropped out or somebody else wanted to go, they had to reissue the itinerary. So what this does, it takes all those things that are on a piece of paper and puts them in an app that you have on your phone. And once it's digital and the software is at a good level, you can manipulate all that data. For example, if you want to know in the morning from your hotel to the track who's in your bus, you can easily sort, here are the 6 people that are in my bus. And if I'm running 5 minutes late or I need to do something and I can't be down in the lobby on time, I can tell those 6 people with a quick message, wait for me, I'll be 5 minutes late, without having to tell everybody in the itinerary or searching for their phone numbers or whatever. It's all at your fingertips. And when I land, the app knows, because it's in chronological order of events, which is why it's Eventar. When I land, it knows I've landed. And the next thing that comes up on your phone, if you're in the app, is your confirmation number at Avis or Hertz. So when you're in the queue, you get there, here's my confirmation number. When you get your car, it knows. And the next thing that you've got is a map through Google Maps to your hotel, and it knows where you're going. And then when you get to your hotel, you've got your booking reference. Some teams have been using it already, the Formula 2 team, and I'll give you an example. They flew back to Heathrow. The automatic gate didn't open for them as they were driving their bus out of Heathrow back to Silverstone, and they had to push the button, and the lady said, well, sorry, we don't recognize your number plate. What's your confirmation number? And the lady said, instead of me going into my briefcase trying to find the confirmation number, I looked at the app and there's a confirmation number and the gate opened. So it just makes all that travel itinerary and connecting the itineraries of others really, really easy. Like I said, it was designed for Formula One teams because most teams have over 100 people traveling to 24 or 25 events, really, if you count winter testing. But it can be applied to all sorts of other events, including other sports teams or, American universities that have loads of sports teams that travel, or even other events. If you're going to a concert with 10 or 12 of you from all over the world, you can then coordinate your itinerary in one place. And that's really what it's for. And it just makes travel and itinerary sharing much, much, much easier.
That sounds amazing. What were some of the challenges in getting the app up and running? And for yourself as well, what was it like for you being able to have, the time to really, put all your energy into it?
So this app started with the Formula One team, and it took about a year to develop it to the level where it was perfect for all those people traveling. So it took us just about over a year to refine it to a place where, now it works flawlessly. Yes, you have to put the data in, but you put the data in once, and then you have it for the 125 travelers. And the other nice thing is if you do this repetitively, meaning the following year you go to the same place, you come into Miami and say 80, 90% of the people that are coming to Miami again are the same. The next time you put data in, it's a lot simpler. There's a new flight number and maybe a new hotel you're staying in, but the 125 travelers, maybe 110 of them are still the same. You don't have to put their names in and all the other stuff that goes with it. So it's taken about a year to get it up and running, and we have some F2 teams using it now. Formula One team is about to start, and the thing that I like is they all say 10. Everyone that's using it say 10 out of 10. The users like it, and the administrators like it. Sorry.
No, it's like I was just going to say, it's not just for businesses, teams, companies. I mean, I asked the developer about, could I use it for argument's sake, so my wife can keep track of me, so to speak, and my travels. So I can put all my travels into this app, and she knows my flight numbers, my hotels, where I'm staying, rather than sending emails to her backwards and forwards.
Or if something changes, if your flight's canceled and you get a new one, you put it in the app and she knows. Or you could block her.
Well, obviously, we wish you the best of luck with the app, and hopefully we see it across motorsport all over the world. Moving on to the Miami Grand Prix, and Lando Norris, finally a race winner. It only took 110 races. The safety car did add an element of luck, but most importantly, the Brit got the job done.
Yeah, for me, absolutely. There was a bit of luck, but that's racing. You can say that about Max's first world championship. There's a bit of luck with a late crash, I think by Latifi, if I remember correctly. And this is no different than a safety car came out. Similar here, but at the end, there was a restart and a race to the end, and Lando did the job, didn't make a mistake. And created a gap between himself and Max, and he deserved the win.
It was long overdue, Nick. Definitely long
overdue.
It really was. I mean, you mentioned there was an element of luck, of course, partly assisted, let's not forget, by Max Verstappen driving over a bollard at the exit of turn 15. Am I right in thinking,
Turn
Nick?
15.
Turn 15, hit that, caused a little bit of damage to the floor underneath, and we're led to believe that cost him 0.2 seconds per lap. Would that have made any difference? really hard to say if that hadn't taken place. But certainly Lando, as Otmar has mentioned, drove a really clean race throughout. Absolutely perfect. That first stint was superb on those tyres. He was the last to pit, managed to keep that tyre life going. And as we discussed in F1 Update, once he got clear air after Checo had pitted, he nailed those fastest laps. And really, that's what thrust himself into contention up until the point when the safety car came out. And after that, as Otmar's mentioned as well, he pulled away and made it a clean victory and a deserved victory as well.
We also mentioned yesterday how 12 months ago in Miami, McLaren were absolutely nowhere. They're at the back of the field. They've gone through this huge transformation through significant upgrades. The one that comes to my mind is at last season's Austrian Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri discussed after the race yesterday how, this is another step in their upwards trajectory. How big a marker is this for the team in their rise from where they were 12 months ago to where they're aspiring to be?
Well, I think, when you're not winning and you're chasing the winners and the world champions, this is exactly what you have to do. You have to make sure you bring upgrades at a higher cadence than the guy you're chasing. And you have to bring upgrades that always perform. You can't go sideways or backwards. And it seems like that's what they're doing. Their big upgrades always result in better on-track performance, which is crucial. And then the other thing you have to do is either bring them more often, or when you do bring them, they have to be bigger than your competition, so you're actually making ground up. And it looks like, from the outside, I haven't worked there, it looks like they've been able to do that. And like you said, from Austria last year, they started the season, they were very, very poor. By the end, very good. And they've continued on that same trajectory. And that's really, really important for them to, if they aspire to do even better, is, like I said, either bring more of them, or when you do bring them, they're so significant, more significant than your competition, and they work.
Just how much time, effort, and resources required to bring an upgrade package like McLaren brought to the track this week?
Yeah, so it all depends how big it is, but it does take a lot of time, effort, and resource. So, if you bring an upgrade like they did here, you've got all the FEA guys working on it. Well, first the tunnel, right? So you have to find those upgrades in the tunnel through CFD, your tunnel, your model design, model makers. Once you have that and you're happy with it, you release it to full size. Sometimes you release as you go, so you save some time. And therefore it goes through FEA, then full size design, and after that manufacture, and then putting it onto the car. So, that can take 8, 10, 12 weeks, depending on what you're making. So it is a big effort. And in those 8, 10, 12 weeks, whatever it is, how quickly you can make it, it's a big part of the organization that's actually working on it. So, when you see the McLaren seniors, a team principal, CEO, thanking everybody back at the factory, they're absolutely right in doing so, because it's a huge effort from the factory to do what they've done.
Otmar, thinking back to the 2020 Sakir Grand Prix when Sergio Perez claimed his first win in F1, for a team principal, what are the emotions like when, one of the drivers you're, in charge of claims their first victory?
Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing for the driver. It's amazing for the entire team, including the team principal. You're anxious, nervous, and you have a bit of anxiety in the last 5 laps that nothing goes wrong, and you're looking at the data, or the engineers are, to make sure you don't suddenly start overheating or have a hydraulic leak, or you're losing water pressure, or whatever it is, and you're just hopeful that it's going to finish like it does. And then when it happens, you're elated, you celebrate, you're happy for everybody. But then for me anyway, it was quickly on, okay, we've done this, now let's keep going, let's keep improving. And I'm sure McLaren will be the same.
Ian, sticking with Perez, he almost performed the cardinal sin at the opening corner. It came so close to taking out Max Verstappen it was a tough weekend for Checo. What do you make of his performance in Miami?
Yeah, Carlos Sainz described him as a torpedo going into that turn one, nearly massive incident, or it could very, very well have been a massive incident. If we flick back to Mexico City Grand Prix of last year, something very similar, where he just hurtled straight into that first corner. On this occasion, he was very fortunate that he didn't take out his own teammate. Max has said that he had just the slightest bit of damage. He felt the slightest touch, minuscule, I think he described it as, but it was enough just to make him wobble a little bit into that coming out of that first corner. But it could have been so huge for both Red Bull and significantly potentially for Checo's hopes of securing a new contract, because as we know, he's desperate to stay. He wants to remain at Red Bull for next season, quite rightly so. Why wouldn't he? But if he'd have wiped out Max at that corner, Otmar, how would you view it? Because as a team principal, would you have second thoughts then if one of your drivers had done that?
Yeah, I mean, he got away with it. I understand it. He's fourth on the grid, and probably the quickest way to go from fourth to third to second is at the start. If you don't do that then it's overtaking, having to set people up. It takes longer. You got to wait for DRS, all sorts of things. But at the start, you can make up a couple of places, and a lot of drivers do. As it turned out, he didn't hit anyone, maybe Max a little bit. I didn't realize that. But I think thereafter he settled in and put in a solid performance. Where did he finish? Fourth?
Fourth.
Yeah. So he got not on the podium, but it's where he started. He got decent points. And I think Ian, you're right. He's got to perform to keep his drive. But if I were Christian or Helmut or the combination of those that make decisions there, I think Checo's a great number 2 to Max. When he settles in, he doesn't make many mistakes. Was he second in the championship now?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he's second in the championship, where that's where you want him to be. I think this year versus towards the end of last year, he's really stepped it up and is doing the job for Red Bull. Let's see how that continues in the future. I hear they've got an upgrade coming in Imola, which is the next race. So it'll be really interesting to see how their upgrade works and how Max and Checo perform as a pairing in Imola once they put their upgrade on versus the McLaren now and the Ferraris as well.
It was Miami last year, if you remember, Nick, where it all started to go wrong for Checo.
Yeah.
Because he'd had a decent start.
He was
a couple of race wins over that first 4 Grand Prix. He was up there, and there was all this talk, could he really match Max for the title? Then in Miami, he was on pole. Max had started 9th. Max went and won the race ahead of him. So, and as I say, that's where it all started really to go wrong for Checo last year. Hopefully an incident like that yesterday doesn't get into the back of his mind again, start to affect his confidence. And there's no repeat of what occurred last year.
So, Otmar, as things stand, do you see in your eyes that actually Sergio probably will remain at Red Bull next season?
Yeah, I think he will. I think he's doing he's doing the job. And like I said, if I were making that decision, I would keep him. The combination seems to be working. 2025 again will be a year where no big regulation change. And for me, if that combination of driver is working, I would keep it the same.
Even though Carlos is on the market, how would you assess the two?
Well, for me, the only thing, and Carlos has done a brilliant job, he's a great driver, is when you introduce that element of newness, you don't know what you're going to get. With Checo, you know exactly what you have. So if you're confident that with the combination that you have, I can win the championship in 25 as well, that's why I would keep it. If you introduce Carlos, maybe he's close to the max. Maybe if that's the case, you have more of these cases where I've run into him, I shouldn't have. You know what I mean? So the only reason I say it is so far that combination has delivered. And if you think that combination will deliver in the future, I wouldn't introduce something new, because something new also introduces some kind of unknown risk. It's the only reason I say that.
Makes complete
That
sense.
makes
Of
sense.
course, there was there was obviously a lot of talking about Red Bull in Miami because it was announced ahead of the Grand Prix that Adrian Newey is going to be departing. It's been spoken about in great detail, but just how big a loss is this for Red Bull, considering they've never won a race without him?
Yeah, I mean, Adrian's been a part of their success, that's for sure, and you can't deny that. Not only has he been a part of their success, he's been a part of Williams' success. He's been a part of McLaren's success in the past. He's a supreme competitor, Adrian. He brings more than just aerodynamic knowledge to the party. He was a race engineer, mechanical designer as well. So I think he's one who understands the entire car and how to make it go faster, or what it takes for a racing car to go fast. And I'm sure he's imparted that knowledge on others there, and he's put a big infrastructure in place. The machine that makes those cars go fast, that machine will still exist. The infrastructure that they put in place will still exist. The technical directors, performance directors, head of aero, all those people will still exist. They won't lose their knowledge. But to me, you have to ask, how much of the direction of where to look for performance comes from Adrian, and that's the bit I wouldn't want to lose.
If you were still a team principal, would you want to do everything to try and bring him on board?
For sure.
Knowing he's on the market?
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
So
even
sailing,
if it's in a role like, I remember the days where Schumacher was very successful at Ferrari with Ross and Rory Byrne, and I don't know who else was there, Jean Todt, Paolo Martinelli, and Rory Byrne retired. However, he stayed on as a consultant, and even if it's in a consultancy role somewhere, just to help with direction and where to look for performance, even though I might not be looking for it myself, but I know where to look. I would have him even at that. But yeah, for sure, as a team principal, I'd like to have him.
Otmar, you mentioned there, obviously, Michael Schumacher's historic stint at Ferrari. Adrian Newey says that when he officially leaves the Red Bull company, that he wants to enjoy a bit of sailing. Do you think he's sailing straight to Maranello?
No, I mean, if he does sail to Maranello, I think he'll be sailing around the Med a little bit beforehand. But I don't know is the right answer, but if I had to guess, I bet Adrian is telling the truth and would want a little bit of time off and then decide what to do next. That's my guess, but I don't have that knowledge.
He's been doing this for such a long time now, Nick. You could understand him just wanting to take a little pause, even if just for a few months, But obviously, any team is going to want to try and get him in, particularly with those 26 regulations coming on board, because they know it's going to be key to their hopes of stopping this Red Bull juggernaut at the moment.
Moving past Red Bull, because we've got to talk about more than just Red Bull and Max Verstappen and Newey. Let's talk about Kevin Magnussen, because he endured, I think saying a weekend to forget is probably the biggest understatement of the season so far. He amassed 65 seconds worth of penalties across the sprint race and the main race. It's something unheard of. Ian, you said yesterday in the F1 update that you've never seen a driver in all your time working in F1 quite so angry in the media pen. It's where do you even begin explaining the weekend he had, Otmar?
Well, that happens from time to time. I think the important thing is that it's not something that happens more than from time to time. It's something that you don't repeat. And, drivers can have hellish weekends, and yet for sure it wasn't the best for him. And he amassed a lot of penalties. Came together with a couple of cars, and had a scrap with Lewis, and then came together with Sargent. And unfortunately for Logan, it was his home race, and not only was it his home race, he was actually, relative to the car he has, doing a pretty good job in the race, and did a good job all weekend. And I wanted to see where he could finish that race, and we never really got to see that. I think Kevin was a bit over exuberant going into that turn. But anyway, for me, if I were Kevin, I'd put it behind me. You can't change the past. And I look forward just to make sure that doesn't happen again.
How do you go about doing that? Because he's now 2 points away, in particular, from a race ban because it's collected a certain number of points across the weekend. How do you go about picking up a driver from that type of weekend, raising his confidence?
So I remember when we first hired Pierre Gasly, I think he was 2 points away from a race ban. Most of those points, or all those points, were not with our team. Some of them he picked up when Toro Rosso knew he was coming to us and asked him to do things where they knew he might get those 2 points. But so I had a driver in that situation, and you just have to remind him that, don't make silly errors. Be cognizant of the fact that if you're in a situation where you might pick up those 2 points, don't take that risk. And he'll know that. He'll in the back of his mind, he'll know that. I mean, sometimes it's instinct as a driver to fight hard where you're out there because that's what you need to do. And then you just have to control that fighting hard instinct with being a bit prudent when there's a situation where it could go wrong and you can pick up those last 2 points.
As we discussed in the F1 update, Nick, he's now got 18 races to get through this season because the first of those points don't come off his super license until March next year.
Oh, I see. So he's got the rest of the season.
Yeah,
it can be done.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the same with Pierre, and he did it.
Yeah.
So it can be done.
He can do the impossible. Otmar, I'm really intrigued actually in your thoughts in the Haas strategy we've seen a couple of times now this season where they've used Kevin almost like an anchor to hold up the pack behind to allow Nico Hülkenberg ahead of him to build an advantage in a points position. We've seen already this season how key points are for the bottom 5 teams. Do you think this kind of strategy is fair, or is it close to crossing that limit?
Look, as an ex-team principal, of course I'm going to say it's fair because for a couple things. It's a team sport, first and foremost. You don't get any money for placing in the Drivers' Championship. The money comes from the Constructors' Championship, and you have to do anything to score team points first and driver points second. So, yeah, if you forego a driver so the other one can score more team points, meaning you can have one finish 10th and the other one 13th, or you can have one 11th and the other one 12th, I would always take the 10th and 13th, or say 9th and 13th versus 11th and 12th. You go 9th and 13th all the time because, like I say, you get money for Constructors' Championship position, and you move up with that with constructor points, not driver points.
One of the issues here, Otmar, that's come out of this weekend is that the FIA has left it in the hands of the drivers to hand back a place if they've, gained an advantage. Do you think now could be swing back and it's the FIA should make the call and say, look, don't do that again, otherwise?
I think a couple things. One, first, leave it up to the driver to give the place back. If they don't, but very, very quickly, you force it. You force it. What you can't do is wait 5 laps to then either give the place back or penalize the driver, because the race has changed so much. You can't make the driver who was who got the short end of the stick whole, right? If somebody overtakes by cutting the chicane, you got to give that place back within the lap. Otherwise, the race has changed. Something could happen behind you or in front of you, or you could be held up by that driver when you're fighting with the guy that's in front of him and you never catch him. So it just has to happen quickly. I think it's okay to allow the team to say, hey, give that place back. But if it doesn't happen within a few corners, then you force it.
I think we're definitely going to be seeing something mentioned in the drivers' briefing at Imola for that Grand Prix, because there were a few drivers that weren't happy with what happened there, and they think it's now time for a change.
Yeah. I agree. It just has to happen quickly. Otherwise, the race changes so much, you can't get it back to fair.
It's always one of those instances as well where you learn from what takes place. I mean, the FIA have said, okay, well, we'll let the drivers, make the call.
Yeah, if that works. If it doesn't, then you make the call.
Now they've learned that really doesn't work, so maybe now they've got to look at it again. You learn from your mistakes.
Totally agree.
Something that myself and Ian discussed in quite a lot of detail last night was the fact that Kevin, for his incident with Logan, received a 10-second time penalty for causing a collision Yet later in the race, Carlos Sainz received only a 5-second time penalty for also causing a collision with Oscar Piastri. Of course, in the Magnussen Sargent incident, Sargent retired from the race. In the Sainz Piastri incident, Piastri didn't, but his race was effectively over. Do you think there's an issue with the consistency in the length of the time penalties that's being awarded?
So if I remember right from the race, the Magnussen was kind of like diving on the inside of him at an apex, which is a little bit different than cutting across, not knowing where your right rear tire or left rear tire is, and touching somebody's front wing end plate. They're just different things, and maybe that's the reason one was punished a bit harsher than the other one. Diving in at the apex, you can get out of that, but not knowing where the other guy's front wing end plate is, and you come across, you can't get out of that. You know what I mean? You're not looking at it, thinking, "Ooh, I better not do this or we're going to collide." But when you're diving in the apex, you know it's coming, and you can either on the brakes or lift and avoid it.
So there you go, Nick. We got our clarity that we were seeking last night when we discussed it.
There we go. Where were you last night? We needed you, Otmar. That would have been perfect.
I was here at my friend Danny and Catalina's.
Obviously, the big winner really from the incident between Piastri and Carlos was actually Esteban Ocon scored Alpine's first point of the season. They've obviously endured a torrid start with their new concept, and it's been very tough for the team since you departed. Esteban, as a driver, how hard does he work behind the scenes away from the circuit to help a team improve?
So Esteban's skill has always been bringing home the points. Even when he was in F3, that's what he was known for. Whenever he drove for me, I remember him in not long ago in a very, very tricky, wet Suzuka Grand Prix with Lewis Hamilton behind him. And the hard thing was the track conditions were constantly changing. It was drying, then it got wet, then it was drying again. So, which means lap to lap to lap, the track conditions are different. So you have to read it very carefully to ensure you don't make a mistake in changing conditions. And you got Lewis in a faster car behind you, and he kept him behind the whole time, didn't make a mistake, brought home the points. His win in Hungary, he had Sebastian Vettel behind him in a faster car, 4-time world champion. And had Esteban made any mistake, Vettel would have been by him because he was in a faster car. Esteban held him back, didn't put a foot wrong, came home with the points. So that is Esteban's skill. And I think looking at Miami, that's what he did. He scored the 1 point because others had crashes, did what they did. He moved up, but he didn't make a mistake. And lo and behold, he got a point. I mean, for me, that's not a lot. Last year, when all those seniors that have now left, I think we scored 6 points last year. And then we left Miami with 6 points in the bag and went to the next race was Monaco.
Yeah, Monaco, because
and I think
Emilia-Romagna was cancelled.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We went to Monaco, and I think in Monaco we scored 24 points. So yeah, they're struggling, but I can't see them doing what McLaren have done, for example. Going to Monaco and scoring 24 points this year, or Imola. I don't think that's going to happen.
And of course, it now leaves Williams and Stake as the only teams without a point. Speaking of points, the point system across the last two Grand Prix has been discussed amongst the drivers and the team principals about potentially a new point system going forward, potentially points down to 12th, or even some saying points going from first all the way down to 20th. Would you be in favour of a new points system, or do you think it should stay with the 1st to 10th?
That's a good question, and for me, all those in the top 10 are fighting to get a place higher if you're in the top 10 because you get more points. And the driver that's in 11th is also fighting hard because he knows he's getting 0, and then he's moving up to a point scoring position. But if you're 15th fighting for 16th, maybe you don't fight as hard because you're or 16th fight for 50th. You're not getting any points. So if you move that down to 12th, perhaps you have more fights on track. But moving it all the way to 20th, maybe I'm a traditionalist. When I started, we only got points to 6th, for example. I think 10th is better than 6th. Should you go to 12? Maybe, but I wouldn't go past that. You've got to have some kind of performance in your car to score, and driver and team to score some points. We shouldn't be giving away points just because you participate.
Would it be a further Americanization of the sport if we went down that route? Because obviously we've seen a lot of different things introduced following the arrival of Liberty Media. Would this be another one of those, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you're making it more American by adding points all the way down. I think that where we are now isn't bad. Top 10, where you have 20 drivers, the top half score points, the bottom half don't. It's logical to me. If you move that to 12th, you might get some more fights in the midfield, which helps the fan. Maybe I've been living in Europe too long.
I agree with Otmar. I don't want to see it go that far either. So,
no, I completely agree. And obviously, for those who are watching on YouTube, let us know your thoughts on whether the point system should be changed in the comments below. Otmar, final talking point before I ask you for your thoughts looking ahead to the season. Silly season. It's been so far the silliest of silly seasons. It was all kick-started, obviously, by Lewis announcing his move to Ferrari. We've seen almost all the leading drivers be linked to move elsewhere, including obviously Max being linked with a huge move to Mercedes. Obviously, Adrian Newey has joined the silly season party as well now. How disruptive is silly season of this magnitude to a team and a team principal? And have you known anything quite like this in Formula One?
No, in my 26 years, this is probably the silliest of silly seasons that I've seen. Look, it depends on what team you're talking about. You can definitely compartmentalize this type of silliness and then continue to focus on the job at hand. However, if you're not good at compartmentalizing that kind of stuff and keeping it to a side, it can have an impact. So to me, I would rather not have to do all this constantly. Leave it for a time when you're actually needing to do it. Luckily, this only happens when drivers are out of contract, and usually they sign 2, maybe 2+1, so it doesn't always happen. But like last year, for example, no driver changed. And this year, there's so many of them that are going to be out of contract, so you get all this kind of stuff. Anyway, it's part of the sport. I think the media enjoys writing about it.
We do.
I think the fans enjoy reading about it. Otherwise, the media wouldn't write about it. So, it is part of what we do. And I think the teams have to be good at, like I say, compartmentalize the silly season and get on with the job at hand. And it looks like, those at the top are doing it just fine.
How difficult is it to try and discuss with out of contract drivers behind the scenes to make sure that nothing gets out to us guys in the media, to try and keep it secret?
Yeah, so you do all that, and before it gets out into the media, like I say, or a lot of people say, I didn't say it, there is no smoke without fire. So all those discussions are happening, and then somehow it leaks a little bit. But you always say to the drivers, let's keep this between us. If it gets out in the media, it'll make it more difficult. And most of the time, I agree. You try to get your deals done without it going into the media and having a big impact on what you're trying to do. It's not that team principals or teams don't want the media to have the information. The reason you keep it to yourself is so you can get a better deal done without everyone else knowing what you're doing.
Makes complete sense. I've got to ask, Max Verstappen, will he or won't he leave?
So again, I'm guessing. I don't speak from knowledge. If I were Christian, I would try to keep him. He's great. We're lucky to see a guy like Max in our day racing, while we're involved. And for me, if I were Max, for example, as long as Red Bull are performing to the level that they are, I would stay. So for me, 2025, Honda powertrain. Apart from Adrian, everyone else is the same. You got a good chassis. The regulations aren't changing. Why leave?
2026, when they do change,
2026,
no one knows. Huge
change. No one knows. Powertrain changes as well. No one knows that. Massive change. Then you've got to guess where is the best spot I can pick. But for me, 2025, I would definitely stay. I mean, I think he's contracted
until 2028.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think 2026 requires a whole podcast dedicated just to that. Just finally, Otmar, before we let yourself go, based on what we've learned so far this season, what are you most looking forward to? Looking ahead to the remaining, how many races is it left now? 17, 18?
We're only 25% of the way through this season. It already feels long.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, to me, there's still some fights at the top, like we said. I think Sergio will do a really good job and work hard to finish second in the championship. I think that's important for him. Sainz and Leclerc, I see a fight there. What else? At the bottom, Alpine have scored a point now, and I'm sure that Williams and
Sauber.
Kick Sauber.
Yeah,
I think that's
depending on what race it is.
On what race?
And I think Kick Sauber too want to score a point or two. So I think that's not over to see who finishes 8th, 9th, or 10th. I think Bottas was running in the points recently where he had a failure, and he would have scored that point. So he should have had that point. Williams, for me, I don't know if they're bringing upgrades, but I think their performance in the last two races are such that they're going to struggle to score a point, but not Kick Sauber. And so let's see where that goes too. So there are fights up and down up and down the grid and that'll be interesting for me.
I think the big one, Nick, is of course McLaren. Was yesterday a one-off? Are we going to see more from them now they've got this upgrade package on the car? As we know, Lando had the full package in Miami. Oscar only half of it. So he's going to get the full package in Imola now, next race. As I say, was this a one-off? Or are they now going to be more in the fight with Red Bull and Max especially going forward? I think for many neutral fans, that's what they really want to see. They want to see Red Bull now challenge going forward for the rest of this season.
And to add to that, Imola will see a Red Bull upgrade. How big is it relative to the one that McLaren brought? Are they going to, and what's the gap? Like you said, Ian, if it's true, if Max had some damage, and it was 0.2 of a second a lap, that 0.2 of a second meant they're about equal in the, at the end of the race, or maybe Red Bull just marginally quicker. If that's the case, and their upgrade, where does that all pan out? What's the racing look like thereafter? I think that's a very good point. People should be looking at that.
That is the big talking point, really looking ahead to Imola. Is McLaren's Miami performance a fluke, or is this genuine, their real pace?
I don't think it was a fluke, but was it a racetrack where the conditions are upgrade, the track suited us? And was it a track where Red Bull, like Max was saying, I could never get grip, not just on the front tires, but it felt like we're sliding all over the place, and that goes away, or you learn how to fix it, and therefore the performance gap is still there. That's the kind of thing that you only find out in time.
There's a lot of teams, as we know, a lot of drivers had trouble with the tires. Lando in that race especially, the car, the tires, the conditions, everything just worked perfectly for him.
Now, something we do here on the RacingNews365.com podcast at the end of each podcast is a bold prediction. It can be absolutely anything. In the last podcast, I predicted correctly that Lando Norris would win, so I'm very proud of myself for that.
That was a fluke.
Usually, it probably was a fluke, because most of our bold predictions are shocking. Otmar, it can be absolutely anything looking ahead to the rest of the season, but I'm going to put you on the spot. What is your bold prediction?
So, I've learned from my friends in Switzerland, they predict that in the Swiss mountains, if they have snow in November, they will have Christmas in December.
Oh, that's the bold prediction. And I think that is a perfect place to end this episode of the RacingNews365.com podcast. Otmar, you have been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your time. From Otmar, Ian, and myself, this has been the RacingNews365.com podcast. We will see you next time. See you later.
Thanks, folks.